Hello Turks and Caicos, and welcome to another very interesting episode of Disaster 365, aired on Radio Turks and Caicos 89.1 FM. I'm your host Alison Gordon, and I'm the Director at the Department of Disaster Management and Emergencies. Today we have with us Mr. Fabian Lewis, and Mr. Lewis is the Radio and Telecommunications Manager at the Department of Disaster Management and Emergencies. Mr. Lewis, it's so good to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so we know how important telecommunications is. We're in the hurricane season, we're at the peak of the season, but even outside of the hurricane season, telecommunications is very, very important. As the telecommunications manager, can you share with us an overview of your role in maintaining and coordinating the island's emergency communication system, especially during the hurricane season?
Oh, I would be glad to do that. In a nutshell, what I am responsible for is just to ensure that there is ample communication before, during, and definitely after a hurricane event. When I say communication, I'm talking about the ability for our responding agencies to be able to coordinate with each other, whether it be by cell phone, sat phone, and my personal favorite, two-way radio. My job is to do the necessaries to enable that environment, to allow for that communication pathway to be very possible, so that the responding agencies can function effectively.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Great job. With the peak of the hurricane season here, how is the telecommunications network currently prepared to handle potential disasters? And are there any preemptive measures in place?
Almost definitely. Again, we are constantly doing some updating and some work. The work never stops with our department as it relates to ensuring that the telecoms network is actually functional. Preemptive work as it pertains to preparing for the hurricane season would range from a few things, from training individuals to ensure that they are capable and ready and they feel confident to use the communication devices, to relocating certain pieces of equipment to allow for better connectivity throughout the islands, and pretty much do some plastering of work to ensure that everything is in a state of readiness. We know that during hurricanes we have a lot of strong winds, so we look at making sure that our antennas are low profile antennas so that they don't create, strong wind resistance so that they can get blown off. It's a lot of bits and pieces that all come together to ensure that the system is robust enough and we have a measure of resiliency.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Lewis. So you mentioned antenna and you mentioned bits and pieces of equipment. But for the general public, what are these bits and pieces and who actually use these radios that you're talking about?
Okay, bits and pieces, yes, most definitely. In order to have a robust and very resilient system, we employ multiple types of equipment to ensure communication. We're talking about, in the first instance, the conventional is what we know. Normal internet that allow for normal email and whatnot. Normal telephony, as we know, there's landlines and of course cell phones. Going down the list now, we're talking about sat phones. Okay, the ability to have a phone that would use the satellites that orbiting the planet to establish phone calls during disaster emergency situations when the conventional lines are down. Going further down the list, we have things like two-way radios, what the layperson known as walkie-talkies. So we utilize a lot of those. For internet, we use something called BGAN. That BGAN stands for Broadband Global Area Network. Picture this, it's about the size of a small briefcase. And during times where the conventional internet is down, the response teams can set it up and establish a link with the satellites that are orbiting, and then we can now have internet. So that's one. Another one that we utilize. So any other emerging technologies that come up, we would try to harness it and use it to make a robust and resilient network. Persons that utilize these types of equipment in the context that we're talking about, it is the responders. We're talking about the fire service, the police, the health sector, public works, those persons that actually respond during times of emergency. For DDME, we would have our volunteers utilize two-way radio, but only if they're going to respond. So it's not, that system that we're discussing here, it's not for the general public to access. It is more for the responders that are going out there to effect some rescue or coordination of relief efforts.
Thank you very much. So if I am, just following up on that point, so if I am a volunteer and I'm interested in radio communication, is it that DDME would provide the training, you know, for me to be able to effectively use it?
I'm so very happy that you asked that question, because it is one of the things that DDME has been working on to try to generate that type of interest. What we're trying to create is a culture of persons to utilize radio in the event that the conventional systems go down. And not only during emergency situations, but in regular use, so persons become climatized and accustomed to the use. So to answer that question, as a volunteer, you will be definitely trained, and you'll be given that knowledge that allows you to be able to utilize these pieces of equipment during a disaster situation. And may I add, you will have the option of enjoying the use, all right, in a different setting where it's not emergencies. And we can discuss that more. If persons are interested at all, we can have a broader conversation. They can come to DDME's office, they can fill out their volunteer form and become a volunteer, and they can probably become part of the team that would make up the telecoms component arm of DDME. And there's a lot that can be had. And like I said, don't let me get going, because we won't stop here. But yes, to answer your question, if you become a volunteer, DDME will definitely ensure that you are trained and you're fully ready to meet the challenges if you are going to respond.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lewis. I know that's your passion. So I noticed that the energy and the glow once we talk about radio, I know that's your passion. Thank you so much. And I really must add commendation, because the feedback I'm getting from our stakeholders is that you really are doing a very good job. And so we really want to thank you for the work that you continue to do and the improvement that you continue to make to the telecommunications network in TCI. So kudos to you and certainly the team for what you're doing. So that leads me to another question. Is there any cutting-edge technologies or innovations that have been integrated into the TCI's telecommunication system to enhance disaster preparedness and response?
To answer that question, we have a lot of plans that would speak to that exactly, but at present, the move from analog to digital is what is running right now. So the system is now at a digital stage. We have plans to move into analog, and I'll give you, not analog, but improve the analog system. And let me just give you a snippet of what I'm talking about. We're looking to add an enhancement to our network that would allow for data to travel through our radio. So think of the internet, the ability for you to send reports, pictures, videos over the internet. The radio presents an avenue to do that, but without an external network. So in other words, what I'm saying is you connect your laptop to your radio, and you'd be able to send pictures, send video, send a report. So imagine something happening at a remote location, and responders are out in the field. They can capture some pictures and send it to the EOC, and the EOC can start making decisions based on what they see in real time. And all of that can be done through radio, not dependent on any other network, and this is what we ultimately want to move the system towards.
That's great. That's interesting. Any timeline on how we can really get that going? Because that sounds very interesting, certainly. So any timeline we're looking at?
Realistically, a good timeline would be somewhere between February next year.
Okay.
That I see we can achieve that. At present, we are laying on the groundwork and ensuring that the connectivity among the islands are robust enough, and that's for just voice communication. And as soon as we establish the voice communication pathways, it's just a matter of adding a few other pieces of equipment to the network, and we would be able to achieve that.
Great, great. Looking forward to it. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. So we have this saying, disaster management is everybody's business, and it's both private and public sector partnership. How does Team DDME collaborate with other emergency services and private stakeholders, such as we have our Digicel, we have Flow, we have Radio Turks and Caicos, we have the Telecommunication Commission, just to name a few. How do we ensure seamless communication, coordinated communication before, during, and after an adverse event?
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for that question. Let's start by saying that everything that DDME does or attempts to do, we're guided by legislation. We do not operate outside the legal parameters. With that, one needs to understand that we have a regulatory commission responsible for telecommunications in TCI. We at DDME ensure that we function within the laws and the standards that they have set out. So there's always an open communication in the direction that we want to go to ensure that we do not infringe or we do not cause any offense. Having said that, the other agencies such as Digicel, Flow, and we're so thankful for them because text messages that go out which inform persons of flooding and adverse weather and all the little SMS that other persons get, we're so thankful for them that they work with us to ensure that that is broadcast to the TCI public. So that again is a whole collaboration. We have other agencies such as Red Cross and a few other business places that come to the assistance, and working with DDME, we ensure that we run some training for those persons. Those agencies, for instance, a shelter management, IDA training. IDA stands for Initial Damage Assessment Training. And we have some individuals from these various agencies that partner with us, and they get the training and they would go out and do the necessaries.
Mr. Lewis, in the unfortunate event of network failures during a disaster, what contingencies do you have in place to restore communication as quickly as possible? Okay,
that is something that is very ongoing. We do not have it 100%, and it'll always be something that's in progress. But to answer that question more directly, if conventional means of communication fail, and we're talking about the normal landlines, we're talking about cell phones, we're talking about the internet is down, then our back end would be our, of course, walkie-talkies, our two-way radios. And these radios are strategically placed with repeater systems that allow for greater reach. For inter-island communication and regional, we have another level of radio communications which would be HF radio, and that would allow for point-to-point communication, and we're talking about worldwide here. So that works well as a part of redundancy. The other component which we're rolling out and we want persons to step up to take up the mantle is the training aspect. We are hoping to get some persons enthusiastic, come on board and receive training so that they can re-establish communications. They would understand the principles of antennas, how the radios work, how to set up in the event that something unfortunate happens and our system goes down. They now on the individual islands have the knowledge and they can set up and re-establish communications. So as a matter of redundancy, that is what we're looking at. If we empower the people, we know the people can get things working.
Thank you so much. And TCI being the multi-island state that it is very, very important for that to happen. Time flies when we're having fun. Very, very interesting conversation. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, Mr. Lewis, but I'm sure you will be able to join us next week for part 2 of this very, very interesting discussion right here on the Disaster 365 radio show. aired on Radio Turks and Caicos 89.1 FM. Sir Louis, your final words.
With closing, what I'd like to say is that we're working on developing a very robust and resilient telecoms network throughout the TCI. It doesn't matter how many pieces of equipment we have, what we need is the human resource. So I want to employ persons to avail themselves, come out, volunteer, and get trained so that they can help the movement if ever we have to call upon them.
I'm your host, Alison Gordon, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place.